The radio crackled to life just as Maria Santos was finishing her morning coffee at the Wildwood Ranch station. She'd been a wildlife ranger for 12 years, and something in the dispatcher's voice made her set down her mug immediately. Possible large animal emergency on County Road 47, the voice said, tight with urgency. Rancher called in something about his prize bull being attacked by what he described as a giant snake. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Maria grabbed her keys and equipment bag, already heading for the door. Giant snake attacks weren't exactly common in central Texas, but invasive species had been moving northward for years. She'd dealt with everything from escaped pythons to aggressive wild boar, but something about this call felt different. The drive to County Road 47 took 23 minutes, and with each mile, Maria felt her anxiety growing. When ranchers called about their prize bulls, it usually meant significant money was at stake. A good breeding bull could be worth $50,000 or more, and if something had seriously injured one, the economic impact on a family ranch could be devastating. She pulled her truck onto the gravel shoulder where she spotted another vehicle, an old Ford pickup with the paint faded by years of Texas sun. An elderly man in a worn cowboy hat was pacing beside it, occasionally pointing toward a cluster of trees about 100 yards from the road. "You the ranger?" he asked as Maria climbed out of her truck. "Name's Tom Rodriguez. That's my bull out there, and I'm telling you, what I saw doesn't make any sense." Maria pulled her binoculars from the truck and followed Tom's pointing finger. Through the lenses, she could see a large, dark shape near the base of an enormous live oak tree. At first, it looked like the bull might just be resting in the shade. Then she adjusted the focus and felt her stomach drop. Coiled around the massive bull's torso were the unmistakable thick, muscular coils of what had to be the largest python she'd ever seen. The snake's body wrapped around the animal again and again, each loop tightening like a living restraint. The bull's head was still up, his eyes wide and panicked, but his breathing looked labored and difficult. "How long has this been going on?" Maria asked, reaching for her radio. "I spotted it maybe 10 minutes ago when I was checking my fence line," Tom replied. "At first I thought maybe the bull was just tangled up in something, but when I got my binoculars out..." He shook his head. "That snake's got to be 20 feet long, easy. Maybe more." Maria keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Santos on County Road 47. I need immediate backup from the emergency response team and a veterinarian if one's available. We have a large constrictor snake attacking livestock. This is not a drill." The response came back quickly. "Copy that, Ranger Santos. Nearest backup unit is about 18 minutes out. Dr. Jennifer Hayes from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center is en route, ETA 25 minutes. Maria lowered her radio and raised the binoculars again. The situation was getting worse by the minute. The bull's legs were starting to shake from the strain of supporting not only his own weight but the massive python wrapped around him. Each time the animal tried to take a breath, the snake's coils tightened incrementally, making the next breath that much harder to draw. "We need to do something," Tom said, his voice strained. "That's Thunder, best breeding bull I've ever owned. His bloodline goes back 5 generations on my ranch." Maria understood the emotional and financial stakes, but she also knew the dangers of approaching a constrictor of this size. Burmese pythons could grow to over 20 feet and weigh more than 200 pounds. Their bite wasn't venomous, but their crushing power was incredible. If they got too close and the snake felt threatened, it might abandon the bull and target them instead. "Tom, I need you to stay back by the vehicles," Maria said firmly. "These snakes are incredibly dangerous, and if we spook it, things could get much worse very quickly." Through her binoculars, Maria watched the bull struggle with growing concern. The animal's breathing was becoming more and more labored. His massive frame, which normally radiated strength and dominance, was beginning to tremble with exhaustion. The python's technique was terrifyingly efficient, every time Thunder exhaled, the snake's muscles would contract slightly, preventing him from drawing a full breath back in. It was slow strangulation, carried out with the patient precision that had made these reptiles apex predators in their native environment. Where did this snake even come from? Tom asked, pacing nervously behind her. I've lived on this land for 43 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Burmese pythons are an invasive species, Maria explained, not taking her eyes off the scene. They've been spreading north from Florida for years. Most of them stay closer to water sources and swampland, but as their population grows, they're expanding their range. This one might have followed the creek system that runs through your property. The bull stumbled, his front legs nearly buckling under the combined stress. Maria's heart raced as she realized Thunder might not have the strength to last until backup arrived. The snake was enormous, easily one of the largest specimens she'd ever heard of being captured in Texas. Its yellowish-brown pattern gleamed in the morning sunlight, and she could see the powerful muscles rippling beneath its scales as it maintained its death grip. "Can't we shoot it?" Tom asked desperately. "Too risky," Maria replied. "The snake is wrapped too tightly around Thunder. Any shot that might kill the python could easily hit your bull instead. And if we just wound the snake, it might thrash around and hurt Thunder even worse." She keyed her radio again. "Dispatch, what's the ETA on that backup? The situation is deteriorating rapidly." "Backup is still 12 minutes out, Ranger Santos. Dr. Hayes reports she's running ahead of schedule and should be there in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Maria looked through her binoculars again and felt a chill run down her spine. Thunder's breathing was becoming increasingly shallow and rapid. His legs were visibly shaking now, and she could see foam forming around his mouth, classic signs of severe respiratory distress. "He's not going to make it 20 minutes, she whispered to herself. Tom must have heard her because his face went pale. "There's got to be something we can do. I can't just stand here and watch Thunder die." Maria lowered her binoculars and looked at the older rancher. She could see the pain in his eyes. This wasn't just about money. Thunder represented generations of careful breeding, countless hours of care, and probably held a special place in Tom's heart the way that working animals often did for the people who raised them. "Let me think," Maria said, raising the binoculars again. As she watched, something caught her attention. Thunder's movements, which had been increasingly frantic and panicked just minutes before, seemed to be changing. Instead of the random struggling she would have expected from a terrified animal, the bull appeared to be moving with more purpose. His hooves were finding better purchase in the dirt, and despite the crushing weight of the python, he was actually beginning to move in a specific direction. "What's he doing?" Tom asked, apparently noticing the same change. Maria adjusted her binoculars for a clearer view. Thunder was definitely moving with intention now, despite the snake wrapped around him. Each step looked incredibly difficult, but he was making progress toward the large oak tree at the edge of the pasture. The tree was massive, easily over 100 years old, with deeply grooved bark and thick, spreading branches. "I think he's trying to reach that tree," Maria said, amazement creeping into her voice. The python, sensing the movement, squeezed harder. Maria could actually see the snake's muscles contracting as it applied what should have been the final, crushing pressure. Thunder stumbled again, his front legs giving out momentarily, but somehow he managed to keep moving forward. "Come on, Thunder," Tom whispered, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. With each step, the bull's breathing became more labored, but his determination seemed to grow stronger. Maria had never seen anything like it. Most animals in this situation would have collapsed from panic and oxygen deprivation by now. But Thunder kept moving, step by agonizing step, toward that oak tree. When he finally reached it, something extraordinary happened. Instead of simply collapsing against the trunk, Thunder deliberately positioned himself so that the python's head was pressed against the rough, deeply grooved bark of the ancient oak. Then, with what could only be described as calculated precision, he began to rub the snake against the tree. My God, Maria breathed. He's using the tree as a tool. The python's grip loosened slightly as its head scraped against the abrasive bark. Thunder, sensing the opportunity, pressed harder, systematically working the snake's head and upper body against the rough surface. The scraping motion was clearly uncomfortable for the python, and its coils began to loosen as it tried to protect its head from further damage. For 10 agonizing minutes, Thunder worked with methodical determination, using the tree trunk like a giant piece of sandpaper to wear down his attacker. Maria watched in complete amazement as the massive bull demonstrated problem-solving abilities that challenged everything she thought she knew about cattle intelligence. Finally, the python's grip weakened enough for Thunder to break free. The enormous snake, clearly injured and disoriented, released its hold and slithered away into the tall grass surrounding the pasture. Thunder stood there, sides heaving with exhaustion, but unmistakably alive. Maria lowered her binoculars, her hands shaking slightly. In 12 years of wildlife work, she had never witnessed anything remotely like what she had just seen. Thunder had not only survived an attack by one of nature's most efficient predators, but he had outsmarted it using nothing but intelligence and determination. Did that really just happen? Tom asked, his voice filled with wonder and relief. Before Maria could answer, she heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Her backup had finally arrived, along with Dr. Hayes and her veterinary team. But as they pulled up and began unloading their equipment, Maria realized that the most remarkable part of this encounter was just beginning. The backup rangers climbed out of their vehicles just as Maria was trying to process what she had witnessed. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a compact woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, immediately began unpacking her veterinary equipment while scanning the scene with experienced eyes. "Where's the snake now?" asked Ranger Mike Chen, the senior officer who had responded to Maria's call. "It slithered off into that tall grass over there," Maria replied, pointing toward a section of the pasture about 50 yards from the oak tree. "But Mike, you need to see what just happened. That bull used the tree to break free from a 20-foot python. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Hayes looked up from her equipment bag. "Maria, I've worked with cattle for 25 years. They're intelligent animals, but what you're describing sounds like advanced problem-solving behavior. Are you certain about what you observed?" Before Maria could respond, Tom Rodriguez spoke up. "Doc, I saw the whole thing through my binoculars. That bull figured out how to scrape the snake against the bark until it let go. Thunder's always been smart, but this was something else entirely." Dr. Hayes pulled out her own binoculars and focused on Thunder, who was still standing near the oak tree. The bull's breathing had improved considerably, but he was clearly exhausted from his ordeal. His massive frame was covered in sweat, and there were visible marks where the python's coils had compressed his torso. "Well, he's definitely been through trauma," Dr. Hayes observed. "I can see the compression marks, and his posture suggests he's still recovering from oxygen deprivation. But what's interesting is his behavior right now." Maria raised her binoculars again and immediately understood what the veterinarian meant. Thunder wasn't doing what any normal animal would do after escaping a life-threatening attack. Instead of running as far away as possible, or even just moving to a safer part of the pasture, he was standing his ground near the oak tree. His dark eyes seemed to be focused on something in the tall grass where the python had retreated. "He's watching the snake," Maria said, amazement clear in her voice. Mike Chen adjusted his own binoculars. "You're right. And look at his posture, he's not showing fear or aggression. It's more like curiosity." The python was still visible through the grass, coiled in what appeared to be a defensive position. Maria could see blood on its head where the tree bark had scraped away scales during Thunder's escape strategy. The massive snake was clearly injured and vulnerable, but it hadn't moved very far from the confrontation site. "Dr. Hayes," Maria said slowly, "what would you expect a bull to do in this situation? After being attacked by a predator? Honestly? I'd expect him to either charge and try to finish off the threat, or flee to the farthest corner of the pasture." Bulls are territorial animals with strong fight-or-flight responses. This kind of observation behavior is unusual. As they watched, Thunder took a step toward the injured python. Then another. His movements weren't aggressive or defensive, they seemed almost cautious, as if he was approaching something he was genuinely curious about rather than something he feared or wanted to destroy. "This is incredible," Mike whispered into his radio. "Dispatch, you might want to contact the university. We've got some kind of unprecedented animal behavior situation developing here." The python, sensing Thunder's approach, raised its head in a defensive posture. But the snake was clearly too weak and injured to pose any real threat. Its movements were sluggish, and the bleeding from its head wounds was making it even more vulnerable. Dr. Hayes was documenting everything with her phone camera. "In 30 years of veterinary work, I've never seen anything like this. That bull should be as far away from that python as possible. Instead, he's voluntarily approaching it." Thunder continued his slow approach until he was just a few feet from the injured snake. Maria held her breath, expecting some kind of violent confrontation. Instead, what happened next defied every assumption she had about animal behavior. The massive bull lowered his head until he was face to face with the python. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the two animals simply looked at each other. There was no fear in Thunder's eyes, no aggression, just what could only be described as intelligent assessment. Then Thunder did something that made every person watching question everything they thought they knew about animal consciousness. He gently nudged the python with his nose, not to harm it, but as if he was checking to see how badly it was injured. "Are you getting this?" Dr. Hayes whispered to Mike, who was recording on his phone. The python's response was equally shocking. Instead of striking or trying to escape, the massive snake remained still, almost as if it understood that Thunder meant no harm. Its black eyes, which had been cold and calculating during the attack, now seemed to hold something that looked remarkably like recognition. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Tom said, his voice barely audible. "Thunder's checking on the snake that tried to kill him." Maria felt goosebumps rise on her arms as she watched the impossible interaction unfold. Everything she had learned about predator-prey relationships, about animal instincts and survival behaviors, was being challenged by what was happening in front of her. Dr. Hayes lowered her camera and looked at the assembled group. "We need to approach this very carefully. Whatever is happening here, we're witnessing something that could change our understanding of animal intelligence and emotional capacity." When Mike took a step forward with a capture pole, intending to safely remove the injured python, Thunder immediately positioned himself between the snake and the rangers. His message was unmistakably clear: the python was under his protection. "He's guarding it," Maria said in disbelief. "Thunder is protecting the snake that almost killed him." Dr. Hayes made a decision that would have seemed impossible just an hour earlier. "We're going to treat that python's injuries, and we're going to do it with Thunder's permission." The veterinary team worked slowly and carefully, with Thunder watching their every move. They cleaned the python's wounds with antiseptic and applied bandages to the worst of the scraping damage. Throughout the entire procedure, the massive snake remained calm and cooperative, as if it understood that these humans were helping rather than harming it. "The wounds aren't life-threatening," Dr. Hayes reported as she worked. "Mostly superficial scraping and scale damage. The snake should heal completely within a week or two." As the sun began to climb higher in the Texas sky, Thunder lay down near the oak tree. The python, now bandaged and recovering, coiled itself nearby. Not in an attack position, not defensively, but in what could only be described as companionship. "They're staying together," Mike observed, shaking his head in wonder. "A bull and the python that tried to kill him are choosing to keep each other company." Dr. Hayes set up a portable monitoring station to observe the pair throughout the day. Every few hours, Thunder would stand and check on the python, gently nuzzling it with his nose. The snake, in response, seemed to relax whenever the massive bull was near, its breathing becoming slower and more regular. Word of the extraordinary encounter began to spread through the wildlife community. Dr. Hayes made calls to colleagues at 3 different universities, describing what they were witnessing. By late afternoon, wildlife biologists were already making plans to travel to the ranch to document what many were calling the most remarkable interspecies bond ever observed. The scientific implications of this are staggering, Dr. Hayes explained to Maria as they maintained their vigil. We're looking at evidence of empathy, forgiveness, and protective behavior between natural enemies. This challenges fundamental assumptions about animal consciousness. As evening approached, Thunder and the python had developed what appeared to be a routine. The bull would graze for a while, always staying within sight of the injured snake. The python would rest in the shade of the oak tree, occasionally lifting its head to track Thunder's movements. When Thunder returned to rest, the snake would position itself close enough for the bull to easily check on its condition. It's like they're communicating, Tom observed. Not with sounds, but with positioning and movement. Maria had been documenting everything in her incident report, but she kept stopping to add observations that seemed too extraordinary to be real. How do you officially report that a bull had demonstrated strategic thinking, tool use, and then shown compassion to its attacker? Dr. Hayes, in your professional opinion, what are we looking at here? Maria asked. The veterinarian was quiet for a long moment, watching as Thunder gently touched the python's head with his nose before settling down for the night. Honestly, Maria, I think we're looking at evidence that emotional intelligence exists throughout the animal kingdom in ways we've barely begun to understand. The capacity for forgiveness, for protection of the vulnerable, for looking beyond instinctual responses, it's all here. As darkness fell over the ranch, the monitoring equipment showed both animals settling into a peaceful rest. Thunder's massive form provided a windbreak for the injured python, while the snake's presence seemed to give the bull a sense of purpose that kept him alert and protective. Tomorrow, we'll need to make some decisions about long-term care for the python, Dr. Hayes said. Normally, an invasive species like this would be relocated or euthanized. But this case is anything but normal. Tom Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing all day, spoke up. Doc, I've been thinking about that. This ranch has been in my family for 4 generations. We've seen a lot of things, but nothing like this. Maybe it's time to consider that some connections are too important to break, even when they don't make sense to us. Maria looked at the unlikely pair resting under the ancient oak tree and realized that their story was far from over. Whatever decisions lay ahead, Thunder and the python had already proven that understanding could transcend species, that intelligence could overcome instinct, and that compassion could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The night settled over Wildwood Ranch with an unusual sense of peace, as if the land itself recognized that something extraordinary had taken root beneath the spreading branches of the old oak tree. The first rays of dawn were just breaking over the Texas horizon when Maria arrived back at the ranch. She had spent most of the night writing reports and making phone calls to wildlife agencies, but sleep had been impossible. The image of Thunder gently checking on his former attacker kept replaying in her mind, challenging everything she thought she knew about animal behavior. Dr. Hayes was already at the monitoring station, reviewing data from the overnight cameras. Good morning, Maria. You need to see this footage from around 3 a.m. Maria looked at the small screen as Dr. Hayes played back the recorded video. Thunder was standing over the python, which appeared to be having some kind of distress. The bull was gently nudging the snake with his nose, and when that didn't seem to help, he positioned his massive body to block the cool night wind that had been disturbing the python's rest. He was protecting it from the cold, Dr. Hayes said quietly. The python's body temperature was dropping, and Thunder seemed to recognize that and respond accordingly. Through her binoculars, Maria could see that both animals were awake now. Thunder was grazing nearby while the python basked in the early morning sunlight, its bandaged head held high as it seemed to watch the bull's movements with what could only be described as contentment. How are the wounds healing? Maria asked. Better than I expected. The python's natural healing ability is remarkable, and the fact that it's remained calm and stress-free is definitely helping the recovery process. Tom Rodriguez's pickup truck pulled up to the monitoring station just as a convoy of 3 university vehicles came down the ranch road, kicking up dust in the morning air. Word had spread through academic circles overnight, and wildlife researchers from across the state were arriving to witness the unprecedented bond firsthand. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Texas A&M University was the first to emerge from the vehicles, followed by a team of graduate students carrying cameras and monitoring equipment. Dr. Mitchell had spent her career studying animal cognition and behavior, but even she seemed stunned by the initial observations. "Dr. Hayes, I've reviewed the video footage you sent last night," Dr. Mitchell said as she set up her equipment. "What we're seeing here contradicts decades of established research on predator-prey relationships and animal emotional capacity." As the researchers established their observation posts, Maria noticed something that made her radio for immediate backup. 3 pickup trucks were speeding across the pasture, heading directly toward Thunder and the python. She recognized the vehicles and felt her stomach drop. "We've got trouble," Maria announced to the group. "Those trucks belong to Rex Clayton and his crew. They're wildlife poachers who specialize in exotic animals." Dr. Hayes looked up from her equipment. "How did they find out about this so quickly?" "Word travels fast in certain circles. A 20-foot Burmese python is worth a fortune on the black market. Rex isn't the type to let legal boundaries stop him from claiming that kind of prize." Thunder seemed to sense the approaching danger before the humans fully understood the threat. The massive bull rose to his feet and positioned himself between the python and the oncoming vehicles. His stance was unmistakably protective, every muscle in his 1,800-pound frame radiating determination. The python, still weak from its injuries, coiled closer to the oak tree. It was as if the snake understood that Thunder was its only defense against these new threats approaching across the pasture. Rex Clayton and his 2 partners emerged from their trucks carrying specialized capture equipment, heavy nets, restraining poles, and tranquilizer guns. They moved with the confidence of men who had done this many times before, but they clearly hadn't expected to deal with a protective bull. "Well, look what we have here," Rex called out, his voice carrying across the pasture. "Looks like we've got ourselves a guard cow protecting our payday. Boys, tranquilize the bull first, then we'll collect our snake." Thunder's response was immediate and unmistakable. He lowered his head, pawed the ground with his front hooves, and let out a deep bellow that echoed across the ranch. It was a challenge, clear and direct, to anyone who threatened his unlikely companion. Maria and the research team watched in amazement as Thunder began to move, not randomly or in panic, but with calculated movements that suggested he was implementing a strategy. The bull positioned himself so that the oak tree was at his back, giving him protection from behind while maintaining a clear view of all 3 poachers. "He's using tactical positioning," Dr. Mitchell observed in amazement. "That bull is controlling the battlefield, using the terrain to his advantage just like he used the tree bark against the python yesterday." When Rex raised his tranquilizer gun, Thunder charged. Not blindly, but with precision and purpose. He covered the distance between them in seconds, forcing Rex to dive behind his truck for safety. The other 2 poachers scattered, abandoning their nets and capture equipment in their haste to escape the charging bull. But Thunder wasn't trying to hurt them. As soon as they retreated to a safe distance, he returned to his position between the tree and the python, making it clear that any approach would result in another defensive charge. "That's strategic thinking," Dr. Hayes said, documenting everything with her camera. "He's not acting on pure aggression or fear. He's calculating his responses and using minimal force to achieve maximum deterrent effect." The standoff continued for 20 minutes. Every time the poachers tried to approach from a different angle, Thunder was there, blocking their path. His movements were economical and precise, never wasting energy, but making it absolutely clear that he would defend the python with his life if necessary. Dr. Mitchell was frantically taking notes. This level of protective behavior toward a former predator is unprecedented. We're witnessing interspecies empathy that challenges our fundamental understanding of animal consciousness. Finally, sirens could be heard in the distance. Maria had called for law enforcement backup, and Texas parks and wildlife officers were arriving with federal agents. The illegal wildlife trade was a federal crime, and Rex Clayton's crew was about to face serious consequences for their attempted poaching. As the authorities surrounded the poachers, Thunder maintained his protective stance until the last truck was driven away under arrest. Only then did he relax, walking slowly back to where the python waited by the oak tree. What happened next left everyone watching speechless. The python, in a gesture that defied scientific explanation, gently touched Thunder's leg with its head. It was unmistakably a gesture of gratitude from a creature that most people believed incapable of such complex emotions. Tom Rodriguez joined them at the monitoring station, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose gamble had paid off beyond his wildest expectations. The sanctuary's official dedication is next week. We've got wildlife researchers coming from 6 different states, and the Nature Conservancy wants to use this as a model for other interspecies research facilities. Maria felt a surge of pride as she thought about how far they'd all come since that morning when she'd first received the emergency call. What had started as a routine wildlife incident had evolved into something that was reshaping scientific understanding of animal intelligence and emotion. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Hayes said, her voice carrying a note of excitement. "The preliminary data we've collected is being fast-tracked for publication in the Journal of Animal Behavior. The peer review process usually takes months, but the editor said this research is too important to delay." As they talked, Thunder and Sage were visible near their favorite spot under the oak tree. The bull was lying in the shade while the python was coiled peacefully nearby, its head resting on Thunder's massive flank. It was a scene of contentment that never failed to amaze the people who witnessed it. "Dr. Mitchell, what's your assessment of their relationship now, compared to those first few days?" Maria asked. "It's deepened considerably. What we initially interpreted as simple companionship has revealed layers of complexity that suggest genuine emotional attachment. Thunder shows clear signs of distress when Sage is out of sight for extended periods, and Sage's stress indicators spike whenever Thunder is moved for veterinary examinations. A new vehicle appeared on the ranch road, kicking up dust as it approached the sanctuary. Maria recognized the official markings of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, but this wasn't a routine visit. Director James Morrison emerged from the SUV, followed by 2 people in business attire who were clearly not field personnel. "That's the state director," Maria told the group. "He doesn't usually make field visits unless something major is happening." Director Morrison approached with a formal expression that made everyone slightly nervous. "Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Hayes, I need to speak with you about the sanctuary status. We've had some concerns raised about the long-term viability of this project." Dr. Mitchell straightened, her protective instincts clearly activated. "Director Morrison, our research protocols have been approved at every level. The preliminary findings are groundbreaking, and the facility meets all safety and licensing requirements." "I understand that, Dr. Mitchell. But we've received pressure from agricultural interests who are concerned about the precedent this sets for managing invasive species. There's also been questions raised about the cost-effectiveness of maintaining a facility for essentially 2 animals." Tom Rodriguez stepped forward, his weathered face set with determination. "Director Morrison, with all due respect, this isn't just about 2 animals. This sanctuary is proving that our understanding of wildlife behavior has been limited by our assumptions. The research being conducted here could change how we approach conservation efforts across the country." Director Morrison looked uncomfortable, clearly caught between competing interests and pressures. "Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate your perspective, but state resources are limited, and we have to consider the broader implications of our decisions." Before anyone could respond, one of the monitoring alarms began beeping. Dr. Hayes immediately checked the sensors and pointed toward the sanctuary's western boundary. "We've got an intruder in Sector 7. Something large is moving through the woods toward Thunder and Sage." Through her binoculars, Maria spotted a lone coyote that had somehow breached the perimeter fencing. The animal was moving stealthily through the underbrush, clearly hunting the rabbits that lived in Sage's territory. What happened next would provide the most compelling evidence yet of the extraordinary partnership between Thunder and Sage. Sage detected the intruder first, raising its head and making subtle movements that Maria now recognized as the python's way of communicating with Thunder. The bull immediately became alert, rising to his feet and scanning the area until he spotted the coyote. Instead of charging directly at the threat, Thunder began moving in a wide arc that would position him between the coyote and Sage. Meanwhile, Sage began moving through the tall grass, using its natural camouflage to approach the intruder from an unexpected angle. "They're coordinating their response," Dr. Mitchell said, her voice filled with amazement. "Look at the positioning. Thunder is drawing the coyote's attention while Sage flanks from the side." The coyote, focused on Thunder's obvious approach, didn't notice Sage's movement until the massive python suddenly appeared from the grass directly behind it. The startled coyote spun around to face this new threat, only to find Thunder now blocking its escape route. Working together with perfect timing, they drove the confused coyote back toward the fence line without any violence or direct confrontation. The intruder, thoroughly intimidated by the coordinated response, squeezed back through the gap it had used to enter and disappeared into the woods beyond the sanctuary. Thunder and Sage met near the center of their territory, the bull gently touching the python's head with his nose in what had become their standard greeting after any separation. Then they both returned to their spot under the oak tree as if nothing unusual had happened. Director Morrison lowered his binoculars, his expression completely changed. "In 30 years of wildlife management, I have never seen anything remotely like that. They didn't just react to a threat, they developed and executed a coordinated strategy." Dr. Mitchell seized the moment. "Director Morrison, what you just witnessed is exactly why this sanctuary is so important. We're documenting behaviors that prove animal intelligence and emotional capacity exist at levels we never imagined. This research will inform wildlife management decisions for decades to come." The agricultural lobby's concerns about invasive species management miss the point entirely, Tom added. "This isn't about giving special treatment to one python. This is about understanding how animals think and feel, which could revolutionize how we approach conservation and coexistence." Director Morrison was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing what he had witnessed. Finally, he turned to his companions and spoke quietly with them before addressing the group. "I'm recommending that the state provide additional funding for this facility," he announced. "What we've seen here today demonstrates the scientific value of this research beyond any question. Dr. Mitchell, you'll have the resources you need to expand your team and extend the study timeline." The relief and excitement were visible on everyone's faces. Dr. Hayes immediately began making calls to colleagues who had been waiting to join the research team, while Dr. Mitchell started planning the expanded studies that additional funding would make possible. As the official visitors prepared to leave, Maria found herself standing alone at the observation platform, watching Thunder and Sage in their peaceful afternoon routine. The bull was grazing while the python basked in the warm sunshine, both animals completely comfortable in their shared space. "It's hard to believe it all started with an emergency call about a snake attack," Tom said, joining Maria at the platform. "Sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places," Maria replied. "These two have taught us that understanding doesn't require words, that friendship doesn't require similarity, and that the capacity for forgiveness and protection exists throughout the animal kingdom in ways we're only beginning to understand." As the sun began to set over the sanctuary, Thunder and Sage settled into their evening routine under the ancient oak tree. Thunder's massive form provided shelter and warmth, while Sage's presence gave the bull a sense of purpose and companionship that was visible in his relaxed but alert posture. The research station's lights came on as Dr. Mitchell's team prepared for another night of data collection. Every interaction, every communication, every moment of their remarkable friendship was being documented for the scientific community and future generations to study and learn from. Maria knew that Thunder and Sage's story would continue to inspire and educate people around the world. Their sanctuary had become more than just a research facility, it was proof that connection, understanding, and love could transcend every boundary that humans had drawn around what animals were capable of feeling. In the gathering darkness, the unlikely friends rested peacefully under their oak tree, their bond a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the endless mysteries that nature still held for those willing to observe, learn, and believe in the impossible.